It's certainly my pleasure to welcome you to the beautiful campus of Middle Tennessee State University. Earlier at lunch, Margaret Mason gave me credit for the beautiful weather that you have, and I promise you I did spend some time on my knees last week praying for the weather, but I'd much rather take credit for the ease in the parking situation you had this morning. I ordered all of our students off campus so that you would have an easy time to get to the campus and attend this meeting. On a more serious note, I bring greetings to you on behalf of the 26,500 plus students of our university and the 3,000 employees. We have been very excited the last 5 years, and prior to that, the last 15 years, to serve as host of this very important meeting. I particularly would like to thank our colleagues from SunGard for their support, their ongoing support of this very important conference. Let's give them a round of applause for their partnership with our university. I understand that this meeting is, we have a record-breaking attendance, representatives throughout the state of Tennessee, of course, both public and private institutions, and from 4 states. It has grown over the years. It has grown not only just in size, but also in quality. And we're very pleased to be associated with this important meeting. And I want you to know that I speak on behalf of all of the presidents in our system and in the state in thanking those of you who are here for the tremendous work, all of the IT professionals, the tremendous work that you do behind the scenes, day in and day out, to help our university function effectively and efficiently. Without you, we cannot accomplish our mission of educating the students that come to our institution. And again, I know my colleagues will join me in thanking you for your tremendous work in the critical services that you provide, you perform each day on your respective campuses. I also want to recognize Tom Danford and his staff, Margaret Mason and the committee, for putting together again another outstanding program for you. They're keeping up with things, and I've perused the schedule, and you have a number of very important track sessions, and I know you will walk away in the next 2 days better informed and re-energized to continue to do the great work that you do on our campus. It is also, as I conclude my remarks, I would like to recognize our new Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at our university, Mr. Bruce Petroshak. Bruce, would you stand so that they can see who you are? He's doing a wonderful job here. We welcome him. So have a wonderful meeting. I hope, since I spent many hours on my knees praying for beautiful weather, that you'll have some time to walk around and see our beautiful campus. We're very proud of it. Have a great conference. Thank you so much for being on our campus.
President of Strategy and Planning for Worldwide Operations at Cisco. Since joining Cisco in 1995, Inder has held many executive leadership positions across Cisco, including VP and GM of Worldwide Professional Services, VP and GM for Advanced Engineering Services, and VP for Strategy and Business Development, Customer Advocacy. From 2006 to 2009, he co-led the Enterprise Business Council, which is responsible for Cisco's corporate business, and it represents about half of the company's total revenue. As Senior Vice President of Strategy and Planning for Worldwide Operations at Cisco, he is a member of the company's operating committee and also co-leads Cisco's emerging Countries Council, which focuses on the fast-growing markets in China, India, Brazil, Mexico, and the Middle East. In 2010, Ender published Doing Both: How Cisco Captures Today's Profits and Drives Tomorrow's Growth. This was a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Amazon.com bestseller. In this book, he identifies common business dichotomies and explores how successful companies avoid difficult trade-offs and instead achieve bigger outcomes by doing both. Using this framework, he offers a unique view of Cisco's consistent record of innovation and high performance. Ender is a frequent guest lecturer at the Harvard Business School, Stanford University, the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley, and most recently, Middle Tennessee State University. Ender has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering, an MBA, and is also a graduate of advanced management programs at Harvard Business School. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ender Sidhu.
Thank you, Tom. So is this thing on? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. So yesterday, I was at home back in San Jose, California, where I'm from, and I was preparing for this discussion with all of you folks, and my wife looks at me across the table and she says, "You're looking a little nervous. What's going on?" And I said, "You know, I'm going to be in front of 500 people at Middle Tennessee State University. They're from all over the state of Tennessee and neighboring states, many private and public institutions, and I'm a little nervous." So she said, "All right, let me help you out." She said, "How are you going to start your speech?" And I said, "Tom Danforth's going to come up, he's going to introduce me, and as soon as he's done with that, I'm going to walk up to the stage and I'm going to say something like, 'Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be here,' etc." And she says, "Stop, stop, stop." She says, "That is the most uninspired, boring, insipid way to start a speech." I said, "I thought you were trying to improve my self-confidence, not take it down." But anyway, she's very direct with her feedback, which is very good. And I was thinking, there is a reason why I married this woman, and if I think hard enough, it's going to come back to me. So, but really, on a more positive note, what she said is, she said, if you want to start a speech, you should go read the works of Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during the Second World War, who was a known orator, great speaker. And so I went on to Google and I looked it up, and of course, Winston Churchill, great speaker. And it turns out that Winston Churchill himself said that the most boring, uninspired, and insipid way to start a speech is with the words, "It gives me great pleasure to be here," etc. So, okay. Back to the drawing board, I sort of worked on it some more. And by the way, interesting story about Churchill while we're on the topic of Winston Churchill. Churchill was not always a very good orator. When he started out, he was actually quite commonplace, but what he did is he actually started practicing with a lot of people who were parliamentarians in the British Parliament, and he would practice, and they'd get together. There'd be like about 6 or 7 of them. They'd get together literally every other day. They'd write topics on small pieces of paper, fold them up, put them inside a jar, and then your job would be to come up, you bring a topic out of the jar, you'd open it, and you'd have to give an impromptu speech, unprepared, on that topic for 10 minutes. And they did this for months and years, and that's how he became a great speaker, a great orator. And it turns out, the story goes, that there was an instance once where they were doing this, and it came Churchill's turn to speak. So he goes up, and so he looks, puts his hand in the jar, he brings out a piece of paper, and he looks at the topic. And it turns out that the topic is sex. So Churchill walks up to the podium, he straightens his jacket, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure." And then he sits down. So the point is, you got to adapt. You got to adapt. You got to do whatever comes, whatever goes. You got to go with the flow, and sometimes you got to break all the rules. And we're going to try to do a little bit of that today. So my comments today are about this concept of doing both. Doing both. And this thing's got a little cutout here. I got to make sure I don't accidentally fall in. So Tom, hopefully if I fall in, you can try and help me out here. But doing both. That's the topic that we want to cover today. And I want to begin with a story about the city of San Francisco. I actually live pretty close by to San Francisco, about 40 or 50 miles from there. And I want to show you this quote. This is a quote by a gentleman by the name of James Wilkins. He actually wrote this almost 100 years ago in 1916. And James Wilkins was a journalist, a budding journalist. He was an engineer. He was an architect. But he was also a frustrated commuter because he used to live in a place called Marin County, north of San Francisco. The city of San Francisco, for those of you who might not be familiar, is surrounded by water on three sides. So back in 1916, when they didn't have the bridges, you actually had to get on ferries to come to the city of San Francisco, and the ferries were getting all clogged, the waterways were clogged, and the city of San Francisco was having its growth rate slowed down because they didn't have these bridges. So what Wilkins wrote was, even in the remotest times, long preceding the Christian era, the ancients understood the value of dignifying their harbors with impressive works. The Colossus of Rhodes and the pharaohs of Alexandria were counted among the 7 wonders of the world. But the bridge across the Golden Gate would dwarf and overshadow them all. James Wilkins' piece, a small piece in the San Francisco Call Bulletin, became a rallying cry for the city of San Francisco. They rose up to the occasion. They started raising the funds. They started soliciting approvals and ideas for designs from all around the country. And the designs were very interesting because the challenge was not a small one. Back in 1916, the San Francisco Bay used to look something like this. And in order to build the bridge, it would have to be 6,700 feet across. Those of you who've been to the Bay Area know that it's constantly pounded by 60-mile-per-hour winds. Every day, fog rolls in, which makes construction very difficult. The bridge would have to be tall enough so ships could pass underneath it. And this would have to be done about a dozen miles away from the epicenter of the San Andreas Fault, one of the most active volcanic faults in the country, that just 10 years prior had completely leveled the city of San Francisco, leading to 3,000 to 4,000 people's deaths. And all of this had to be done while preserving the natural beauty of the San Francisco Bay. So it was a daunting challenge. It wasn't a small task, and yet many responded. And one of them who responded was actually a native of Chicago, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Strauss, who was a structural engineer. And he put forth a design which looked something like this: a suspension cantilever bridge. It was a hybrid monstrosity. It looked so ugly that it got derided uniformly. But Strauss persevered. He kept on it. He kept working on it for the next 10 years. He worked on it. He brought in structural engineers. He brought in architects. He brought in designers. He assembled a whole team. He worked the politicians to really get some of the money for it, etc. And the whole city rallied around it. And eventually what they gave to the city of San Francisco was that. Absolutely spectacular, beautiful, beautiful bridge that 75 years later to this day is one of the most photographed bridges around the world. And yet what's very interesting about the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, 6,700 feet across, is that if you were there 70 years ago or 75 years ago when the bridge opened, and you were standing right there on that bridge, and if you looked to the east, what you would notice is that there is another bridge that actually opened 6 months before the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. A bridge that's actually a bigger marvel of engineering, a bridge that's actually structurally a bigger feat of engineering. And yet, nobody talks about that bridge, and that is the San Francisco Bay Bridge. Now, admittedly, this is not the most flattering picture of the Bay Bridge, but I had to make a point, so I picked that one. My point is simply this. You got two bridges, both built within 6 months of each other. Both have been around for 70 years. One of them's talked about a lot, the other's not. And what is the reason? Despite the fact, the Golden Gate Bridge actually today carries 40 million cars across it every year, 100,000 cars every day. But the Bay Bridge carries 110 million cars, 270,000 across it every day, 3 times as many. Yet nobody talks about this bridge. This bridge is actually a bigger marvel of engineering, the Bay Bridge. Just the biggest pier, the underwater part of it is 242 feet under the surface of the water. That one pillar of the bridge, that one pier, that one pillar, the underwater part of it is bigger than the biggest of the pyramids in Egypt. It has more steel and concrete in that one pillar than the entire Empire State Building in New York City. And yet nobody talks about that bridge. Why is that? Why is it that if you were to look at your pictures from your vacation trip, if you have been to San Francisco, you'll see pictures of your kids smiling next to the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, but perhaps not next to the Bay Bridge. And I believe the real reason for that is because the designers of the Bay Bridge picked either one or the other thing. They picked strength over beauty, and the builders of the Golden Gate Bridge decided to do both. They combined strength and beauty. You've seen how beautiful the Golden Gate Bridge looks, but it's not any less strong. As a matter of fact, during the Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco in 1989, the Bay Bridge collapsed, but the Golden Gate Bridge did not. The Golden Gate Bridge sways 27 feet side to side during times of heavy wind. And in the 75 years of its existence, it's only been closed for about 2.5 hours in that entire time due to heavy winds. The Golden Gate Bridge did something that the Bay Bridge did not. It decided, instead of following an either-or approach, to take the approach of both, or approach that we refer to as doing both. Now, what's interesting about this approach of doing both is that sometimes we find ourselves not taking this approach. Why is that? We show up at work, we put on our battle armor in the morning, the suit or the dress, and we show up and we actually start to prioritize. Focus, focus, focus. Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. Pick A versus B. When confronted with choices, always make the decision. Do a few things well, etc. But yet, when we go back to our personal lives, doing both is something that comes naturally to us. If you're a soccer team, or a basketball team, or a football team, you need offense and defense. If you're a gymnast, you need flexibility and strength. If you're a car maker, you need performance and safety. An ecosystem thrives on predators and prey. Musicians who are really good combine training with improvisation. And if you're like me, someone who has 3 children, you try to give them the roots that'll keep them grounded and the wings that'll help them soar. We do both every day, comfortably, every day in our lives. And yet, when it comes to our professional lives, we somehow fall back into this approach of picking one thing versus the other without realizing that there is an opportunity cost associated with this. Now, an interesting thing about the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge was that about 50 years after the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge was opened, a small little company opened its doors about 20 miles away from the Golden Gate Bridge. And when the founders of that fledgling little company were looking for a name for their company, they looked to the city where they were from, and shortening the name of that city gave the company its name. And the image of the Golden Gate Bridge gave the company its logo. That's the story of Cisco and how it actually came to be. But what's interesting is that Cisco didn't take from the Golden Gate Bridge a mere logo and a mere name. It actually adopted a philosophy that has guided us in the 25 years of our existing. It's the philosophy of actually doing both. In virtually every decision that we make, and virtually every decision that we have made in the past, the underlying philosophy is that very simple approach of actually doing both. And it's actually done good things for us in the last 7 years alone, which includes the recession of the last couple of years. The doing both philosophy has generated some good results for us. It's doubled our revenues in the last 7 years, it's tripled our profits, and it's quadrupled our earnings per share. And I know that those may not be the necessarily relevant metrics when you're in an educational environment, but from a business point of view, those are some of the metrics that we look for in our business. And it's worked out well. And for those of you who are not familiar with Cisco, we're a computer networking company. We're 25 years old. We're about $40 billion in revenue. And over the years, we have done a few things where we became very successful. Then we had a bust during the dot-com bust. And then we built our company again over the last 7 or 8 years. And I want to share with you some stories from how we built that and how we applied the concept of doing both during these past 7 or 8 years in rebuilding our company. Cisco is also a company that has about $40 billion in cash because it's been quite successful in terms of its profitability. But it's also a company that is now one of the 30 companies that comprise the Dow Jones. The Dow Jones 30 company, when you see the Dow Jones Industrial Average, et cetera. And it's on numerous best places to work lists and so on and so forth. And generally, we generate net profit after all taxes and so on and so forth of about $1 billion every month. So let's talk about this concept of doing both. And let's actually try to illustrate it by applying it in 2 or 3 examples. And based on the amount of time, I'll go into either 2 or 3 of these examples. The first one is this notion of optimization and reinvention. And that's something that virtually every organization could do. It's something you could do in your personal lives. We all fall into the rut of continuously optimizing every day, a little bit, little bit, little bit. Incremental changes. But every once in a while, a little reinvention does a body good. A little reinvention actually opens up new vistas, opens up new opportunities. And I want to share that a little bit. But it's important. The doing both concept is very simply about doing A and B, and then looking for that multiplier where each makes the other stronger. It's not about leaving optimization behind and doing reinvention. It's about optimization and reinvention together and a multiplier effect where each makes the other one stronger. Some of the ladies in the room might recognize this. Some of the gentlemen might as well. There's a German company called Escada. And Escada is, they started in 1976. They make women's clothes, shoes, perfumes, et cetera, very trendy, very chic, and was very, very successful for a very long time. Thousands of employees, hundreds of stores around the world, very popular. Very, very creative company. Anytime something new had to be done, they were leading ahead. They were ahead of everyone else, and they did it very rapidly. Creativity was in every fiber of their being. And yet, every time there was a new season, they would reinvent themselves and come out with something new. But despite all of that reinvention, their underlying operational capabilities was very weak. And they were not able to sustain their success. Very good at reinvention, not good at optimization, not a good story. They ran into trouble. The opposite is also true. I'm sure many more of you are familiar with Dell. Dell is a company that's extremely good at operations. They're very good at operations. They used to have inventory turns that would make people's heads spin. And they were being held up always as the paragon of the company that is operationally efficient. But in that process, what they did is they forgot that every once in a while they need to reinvent themselves. They need a new formula every once in a while. So when Apple came with its greater inventiveness, Dell couldn't keep up with that. Or some of the other companies, such as the Asian manufacturers and Hewlett-Packard, et cetera. So what Escada did very well is it transformed itself all the while, but didn't keep tuning. What Dell did very well is it kept tuning, but never really transformed itself. And what was the outcome of that? In the case of Escada, in 2006, they were making money as recently as that. 2 years later, from a $17 million profit to a $90 million loss in 2008, and in 2009, they filed for bankruptcy. Dell, as recently as 2005, was named by Fortune magazine in their list of the most admired companies as #1. And yet, a mere 4 years later, they are not even in the top 50 of that same list by the same magazine, Fortune. Both of these companies didn't do the two things, and they did only one. Now, I want to give you an example of what we at Cisco did. And often when you have a speaker come from a company, such as I am from Cisco here today, they come in and talk about how wonderful their company was and how wonderful they've always been. Well, let me tell you this. If you were to go to your web browser on Google and type the biggest supply chain disaster known to mankind, the very first item that would come up would be Cisco Systems, because about 10 years ago during the dot-com era, we had a $2 billion inventory write-down. The reason I'm totally comfortable talking about it is because there's some learnings that came out of it, and unless you're willing to fess up to where you had some drawbacks, you're never going to learn. So we had a $2 billion lesson. What happened? During the boom times of the dot-com era, our business was growing dramatically. We were doing $7-8 billion a quarter. We were $19 billion one year, and we were growing at 55, actually 65% that year, and our next year was going to be actually in the 30 billion range. We were going to miss the entire 20s. That's how well things were going and how well we were doing. Everybody wanted our products. Everybody thought we were brilliant. We weren't, but they thought we were. And we kept up with it. Things were going really well. And then, all of a sudden, the bust. Everything, the market, the bottom fell out of the market. All those dot-com companies, when they had wanted to buy Cisco equipment and they couldn't get it, they placed their orders twice, 3 times, 4 times, making us feel like the demand is this much when it really was that much. And then once the bust happened, they all disappeared, and the demand that was really this much actually became even less, that much. We went from a growth rate of 66% per year annualized to a growth rate of minus 45% annualized in 90 days. It's a little bit like driving down the highway at 66 miles an hour and running into a brick wall that's coming at you at 45 miles an hour from the other direction. It was dramatic. And it was traumatic as well. But it was a big learning. Huge amounts of inventory piled up. What we had to do once we came out of that is we had to sort of really say, okay, what is it that we needed to do? We were, like Escada, we were very good at reinventing. We were one of the first companies that actually took our entire manufacturing and outsourced it. We were actually getting 95% of our orders on the internet. We had a whole bunch of contract manufacturers who were building the product. We were electronically connected to all of them so we could monitor exactly what was going on. And from their factories, they would slap a label on the product and ship it to the end customer. The money would come without us actually going to the end customer, and the product would ship without us ever touching it. 65-70% gross margins as a company, 30% net margins, 30% operating margins, and 24% net margins as a company. Unprecedented, growing tens of billions of dollars every year. But then we had to optimize. All of a sudden, all the reinvention that we were doing, which was hiding all the mistakes that we had committed by not focusing on our operations, came to the forefront. Very quickly, starting in about 2000, we started focusing on the operational improvements. Optimization. As an example, our component suppliers, we had 1,300 of them. We had to slash that down to 300 and focus on doing business with only the few. We had contract manufacturers who were building our product, 20 of them, we had to go down to 3. And our inventory turns as a result of this optimization actually improved by 50%. So all of a sudden, we got our house in order. And the results were very good, but after a while, the results start to plateau because optimization can only take you so far. You got to get out of the rut and you got to reinvent again. And that's what we decided to do, reinvent again. And the way that happened was we hired a gentleman by the name of Angel Mendez, who became the head of our supply chain, which is our manufacturing capability. And he came in and he said, gosh, you're doing stuff this way. Your optimization has run its course. Now we need to reinvent. And let me set out a bold goal out there. He said, I want us to set a goal to become the world leader in supply chain management. Supply chain basically means getting all the material from the various vendors, putting it together, building the product, and then shipping it out to the customer, just kind of the whole manufacturing flow, if you will. He wanted to be number one in that area in the world. I mean, it was so outrageous that nobody at the company could even fathom it. The company that, remember, the biggest supply chain disaster known to mankind a mere 4 or 5 years ago, now thinking that we would want it to become, I mean, it was just unfathomable for people. But we started working on it and started reinventing things. For instance, we had product A, B, C, D, and each of the product had its own processes. So there was no sharing of practices across. The first thing we did, as we said, instead of actually having it by product, let's specialize in the individual processes and rotate the products through so we can share the best practices and keep getting better and better. 1,800 people in manufacturing showed up at work one Monday morning, and 950 of them had brand new jobs and brand new titles. There was a significant amount of pushback, but then we marched through with it, and the reinvention occurred. We were able to get twice the volume of business done with half as many people as a result. Now, we didn't lay off the other half of the people. We repurposed them into other roles where they could add more value, but we were able to do twice as much business with half as many people. So a 4x increase in productivity, which was dramatic, and that was good. Now, one of the questions that one of the goals that we set was we want to be a supply chain leader. But how were we going to measure that? We weren't going to measure that based on our own assessment of ourselves. You always got to get somebody else who doesn't have an interest to objectively measure you. And so we went out and said, which is the most respected survey? Turns out it's this one, AMR Research, an independent company, looks at all the manufacturers around the world, domestic in the US, overseas, everything, worldwide. And every year they publish a ranking, number 1 to number 25. Number 1 is the world's best manufacturer, number 25 is number 25, and then everybody else doesn't even make the list. We had never made the list, never ever made the list. And yet Angel wanted us to get good with that. So we started working on it, and the first year we debuted at 18, number 18. We were overjoyed. Nobody could believe it. Nobody could believe it. We debuted at number 18, and the next year we moved up to number 11, and the next year we moved up to number 8, and the next year we moved up to number 5, and this year we moved up to number 3. The company that was responsible for the worst supply chain disaster of mankind was now at number 3 in the world's best manufacturers. Kind of a rags to riches story, but one where you could see that if you do the optimization and then you do the reinvention, and after the reinvention you go back to optimization and you optimize some more, and then you reinvent some more, and you go back and forth and you keep getting that multiplier, good things happen. So that's the first example of doing both. I want to take 10 minutes each and 2 other examples. The second example of doing both is a very simple notion of excellence and relevance. Excellence and relevance. How many people are familiar with the Segway scooter? A lot of people familiar with it. How many people own one? Not very many. Well, Segway was a product. It was a human, what this guy is riding over there, the two-wheeler, beautifully designed. There's a guy, Dean Kamen, who is a brilliant scientist who started the company and who personally designed this. And this thing is world-class in every little thing, in the way in which it was designed. Dean was completely focused on product excellence. And it was such a good product. I mean, it can climb stairs, it can travel, it can stop on a dime, it can go 13 miles an hour, it can do all sorts of things. And yet, what's interesting is that when Segway first came out, people thought that they were going to sell 40,000 Segways per month. 40,000 Segways per month. I think this was almost 8, 9, or 10 years ago. And somehow, in its entire history, it's only sold about 50,000 compared to 40,000 per month. It was thought to, other than mall security guys and a few police departments and a few other things, it's just not something that anybody wants. Why is that? Because it became irrelevant. It got priced so far out of the market that they forgot about who their customer was and what their customer really needed and what the price point was. This is an example of the relentless pursuit of excellence without caring about what your customer wants. I mean, in an educational environment also, you could have the relentless pursuit of excellence without sometimes caring about what your customer wants. Who is your customer? Is it your students? Is it the people who hire your students? Is it the taxpayers who pay the money for the students' education, et cetera? But excellence is important, but you also have to couple it with relevance. Now, there are some instances where the opposite happens. Take plastic recycling. Over the weekend when I was at home, I had to actually go and roll these drums outside. These are the plastic recycling things that we have to sort out all our garbage into. And it's a very relevant thing. Everybody wants to make the planet greener. Everybody cares about relevance. Everybody believes that this is something that they want to do. They systematically put it in separate things, and yet, what most people don't know is that 99% of plastics, of polystyrene, etc., end up in the landfill. It's shocking, but the reason for it is because despite all the relevance, there just isn't enough excellence in the process of actually recycling it. I mean, polystyrene sells for $100 a ton, 98% of it's air, very difficult to package. Anybody who's tried to recycle it has actually lost money in the process because the process is very difficult. So while Segway was excellence without relevance, this is relevance without excellence. When you don't have both, bad things happen. I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, take the case of carrots, for crying out loud, right? I mean, there's a guy, Mike Urosek, who actually was a carrot farmer. And he would produce carrots, and they would look something like this. And he would go and sell them to the grocers, or he'd go sell them to whoever wanted them. And basically what they found was that 70% of the product nobody wanted because it was misshapen and so on and so forth. It was not the right length, etc. They were actually able to only get 10 cents per pound, 10 cents per bag of the full length ones. And the grocers would buy it at 10 cents a bag and sell them at 25 cents a bag. Till one day, Mike said, "What is it about this? I'm working really hard. I'm making an excellent product. My carrots are the best. But somehow people are not buying, they're not caring." And he said, "I got to make my carrots." And by the way, I deliberately chose this example because I want to show that the idea applies not just to technology, but all aspects of life. He basically said, "I want to make my carrots more relevant." What do people want? They want their carrots peeled. They want their carrots small. They want it bite-sized so they can put it in the dip and have it. So he invented something very simple called baby carrots. And lo and behold, what he was selling for 10 cents a pound is now selling for 50 cents a pound at the store, and the grocers are buying it at 50 cents a pound and actually turning around and selling it for $1 a pound, $1 a bag. So all of a sudden, his market goes 5x in size because he's got a peeler, he's got a processor, and he's got this whole thing going. As a matter of fact, did you know that the average consumption of carrots in the United States actually used to be 6 pounds per person per year? And it went up to 10 pounds per person per year, which is almost double since baby carrots were introduced. I actually did not know that. I suspect most people didn't. But it's just because all he did was he said, excellence in the process is not enough. I got to make it relevant for people. And when you put it together, good things happen. That's why it's important. Now, let me give you a story about Cisco. Cisco is one of these companies that builds these routers and switches that sit somewhere in a wiring closet. Most non-technical people don't know about them, don't care about them. It's a little bit like electricity. So long as the plug in the wall gives you electricity, you don't care what's behind it. You don't care what the grid is, what the network is. You don't care. So long as you can plug it in and it works, you're good with it. Cisco had the same situation. They were building these products that were powering the entire internet, 70, 80% of it, and yet nobody cared about their products. And they realized that if nobody cares about our products and we're never going to be really relevant to our end customers, we were basically the plumbers of the internet. And plumbing is an honorable profession, and it's a lucrative one, and we made a lot of money at it, but we were still the plumbers of the internet. We didn't have the relevance that we were looking for. So what we did in 1995 is we said, how do we become relevant? First things first, let's take our technology and let's use it ourselves. And if we can't convince ourselves of the relevance of it, how can we convince anyone else? So we started a little project called Cisco on Cisco, run our whole company using our own products. Get your orders on it, do your fulfillment on it, run your manufacturing on it, do your voice communication on it, do your video communication on it, everything, run it on Cisco. And what we found is as we started doing that, it made our technology more relevant to ourselves. It made it more robust. We made tons and tons of changes and improvements. And as a result of eating our own dog food, so to speak, we made our technology more robust. But it still wasn't enough. We needed to have a process. Now, some of you here are on the technology side of the house. We had a CIO. His name was Pete Solvik. And usually the CIOs are battling with the president to get more money to be spent on technology. And in companies of our ilk, it's about 2% of revenues get spent on information technology. What Pete Solvik did is he said, and CIOs generally tend to want to increase that number because they believe that this technology will lead to greater benefit. But it always seems like a tussle. So what Pete Solvik did is he basically came in one day and he told all the different businesses at Cisco, the routing business, the switching business, and so on. He said, you know what? Sales guys, engineering guys, marketing guys, services guys, my information technology budget, I don't want it except for a tiny little bit. 80% of it I'm going to give back to you guys. I'm going to give it back to you, and then you tell me what you need me to do. It'll be funded by you out of that budget, and that's what I'll do. And so he kept a small little piece for just providing basic infrastructure, and all of a sudden, these client-funded projects started to happen. So now the business people are saying, so head of sales goes in, basically says, I want to make salespeople more productive. Technology guy, I want you to do this, 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 and this. I want the system to automatically tell a salesperson how much money they made when they sold a particular kind of deal. Everybody cares about that in the sales force. So they created an application. All of a sudden, because he turned the budget over, the business started to care for much more, and technology became relevant through the business. So we created client-funded projects, and all of a sudden, the project started to become successful because it wasn't the technology guys inventing it and giving it to the business. It was the business guys telling what they needed, working with the technology guys in partnership and making it happen. All of a sudden, instead of 2%, it goes to 3%, it goes to 4%, it goes to 5%. So by giving away his budget, he actually more than doubled it, and in the process raised the satisfaction. It's a process whereby he drove relevance within the company for the company's products. And once we did that, that became something that every one of our customers emulated. And then there was a culture element. John Chambers one day asked all of his direct reports, he said, how many of you know how to use the internet? This was back in 1995. Use the internet in a way that can improve your business. And he was disappointed with the results, despite the fact that we were an internet company. And so what he said is, I'm going to do this. Every 6 months, I'm going to have all of my direct reports come in front of me. We're all going to sit in a room together, and each one of you will present to me and your peers for 1 hour each what your internet capability roadmap is and how you're improving your function through use of our technology. And the first couple of times, people stumbled, and they didn't know what to say, and they embarrassed themselves, and so on. And then one of the guys said, I'm going to really work on this because I embarrassed myself. And he went away, and he worked on it. And next time he came in, and he had a great presentation. And the other guy said, I'm not going to look stupid in front of the CEO. They did the same thing. Next thing you know, the culture of using technology to actually enable your business got rooted deeply into the culture. With that, the business results started to show up. The business results could then be showcased to all of our customers. We have about 40 to 50 of them visit us every single day. We showcased that, so our customers started doing that. So all of a sudden now, the little company that existed in the wiring closet is now talking to customers all around the world on how they use technology to get business results. All of a sudden, the combination of technology hardened it, process streamlined it, and culture enabled it. Technology, process, culture came together, and we were able to make ourselves relevant first to us and through ourselves to our customers. And we got $1 billion of annual benefits out of it, either in terms of cost savings or revenue enhancement in 1 year. So that really became something that, and that was back in 1995, and that was the internet revolution. Now what's going on is the collaboration revolution, and during this, we're doing it again. We're doing it again. For instance, our travel budget is $750 million per year. That's just the budget for travel per year out of a $40 billion company. When the downturn came, and that's a large number, And when the downturn came, we basically said, we're going to use our own technology to have people talk to each other in a video collaboration, telepresence, et cetera. And in 1 year, we drove that budget from $750 to $240 million. Now, full disclosure, 240 is not sustainable, so we're back up to about 340, which is a sustainable level where we're keeping it now. But that's still almost $500, $400 million less than what the budget was. And that paid for every technology investment that we had to do in systems like telepresence in the first 6 months. So the benefits are getting repeated again and again because what we're doing is trying to make ourselves relevant in addition to, so technology, using our own technology made it excellent, linking it with the business made it relevant, the two started working with each other, and you got a multiplier effect where lots of good business results came out, lots of heavy technology investments happened as a result of that. So that's the story of excellence and relevance. So we talked about two examples so far of doing both. We talked about the excellence and relevance example, and then we talked about the other one earlier. Now, I want to touch on a third example quickly. And it's an interesting example. I mean, we've talked about optimization, reinvention. We've talked about excellence and relevance. But something all of us have is we have superstars on our teams, and we've got teams. Now, what's interesting is that there's tons of books that have been written about why it's good to nurture teams and so on and so forth. But sometimes what happens in the process of nurturing the teams, and by the way, I'm very pro teams and so on, is that sometimes you can ignore your superstars in the process. And they are the ones who are most equipped to leave. And they do leave. We did an analysis once of our top performers and what kind of a bonus we were giving them on top of their salary compared to the bonus of an average employee. And the difference was 6%. We were shocked. 6%, that's the only difference for all the extra performance the superstars put in. So we went in and immediately changed all of that. And now that difference can be 200 to 300%. The bonus of a top performer can be 2 to 3 times that of an average performer. But it's interesting. I want to talk about this story a little bit by using an example. Some of you recognize these faces. These are the people who were part of the US team that participated 6 years ago at the Olympics in Athens. The US team, 6 years ago. As a matter of fact, Carmelo Anthony, the guy at the bottom in the middle of the screen there, actually said, just a few days before the Olympics, he said, we're guaranteeing a gold medal. We're bringing it back. And yet 30 days later, when the Olympic torch was extinguished in Athens, his words hung over there like a bad odor. Why? It wasn't just a 20-year-old professional basketball player's indiscretion. What it was the performance of the team. In the 8 games that they played, they won 5 and they lost 3, and they finished with a disappointing bronze medal. Now, just to put that in perspective, because where US basketball, which I am an enormous fan of, by the way, but just to put it in perspective, where US basketball stands is that those 3 losses were more than the total number of losses that the US team had sustained in their entire history of participating in the prior 14 Olympics. They had won 12 out of the last 14 gold medals. And yet they came in over here, they lost 3 games. They lost to Puerto Rico 92 to 73, for crying out loud. And then they lost to Argentina and then to Lithuania. People don't even know where Lithuania is. They don't even know what is Lithuania. And yet, the mighty US team lost to Lithuania and Puerto Rico. And they went back and they said, what went wrong? What was going on? Each of these people was a star in his own right. They played at the NBA. They were doing all sorts of theatrics and tricks and so on. But what they didn't know was how to work as a team and come together. Their coaches scripted the plays for them, but each one was off cue a little bit. They weren't really playing for the team. They were playing for themselves. And the results, relative to the expectations, were completely disastrous. And this is something where you saw teamwork didn't happen, everybody was a superstar, and the result was failure. But the opposite can happen as well. There are instances where people can become too team-oriented. And when you get too team-oriented and the only thing you get rewarded for is the collective good, then people don't have the creativity, they don't have the inherent drive to succeed. Groupthink starts to prevail. So you have to figure out a way to actually do, McCann Erickson is a company that's an advertising company. Dan Whedon and David Kennedy were two guys who were young, brash advertising executives who were absolutely brilliant. And they were at McCann Erickson, and they were frustrated by the fact that everything was slow-moving and everything had to be done in a team manner and so on. And so eventually their frustration, they wanted to work with the teams, but somehow everything was done in such a manner that the team and superstar blend didn't gel at McCann Erickson. So they packed their bags and left, and they got together with a scrappy, up-and-coming company out of Oregon that also wanted to establish a name for itself. And that was Nike. And a few days after they landed up over there, Dan Whedon came up with the famous "just do it" thing. And that's what helped Nike get to very good places. McCann Erickson another example. You guys probably have cars which have GPS, and in those GPS systems that you have in the cars, you've got this navigation device. Either it's built in or you buy it at the store. Usually it's a Garmin. I think Garmin is the world's largest producer of those little devices that tell you when to turn left and when to turn right and so on. The Gar in Garmin is the first three letters of Gary Bunnell's name, and the Min is the first three letters of Min Kao's name. They were both working at Allied Corporation, and they came up with great ideas, but they never felt that their ideas got the leverage of bigger teams, and they never felt supported. So they left, and they created Garmin, which is now the world's biggest producer of navigation devices. So you can have both things happen. You can have too much individual stuff, as happened with the US team, and not enough teamwork, or you could have too much teamwork without the recognition of the contributions of the superstars. Both can happen. And this is something that's hard to manage. When you got someone like Michael Phelps on your team, you got to leverage that. They can provide the energy, they can provide the spark, they can really get the team going. But you have to keep a dynamic whereby the other team members can also do it, because it's really important for everybody to win and to win together. And when that happens, it's really magic. It really, really works very well. At Cisco, we had an example. I just want to chat about this for a minute or so. We had a guy by the name of Stuart Hamilton, who I ran into. I've known him actually for years, but I asked him one day, I said, "Hey, Stuart, how's it going?" This was about 3-4 years ago. And he said, "Well, I was browsing through the web at work, looking at Cisco's internal websites, and I found this little video. And what was on the video? It was basically how Cisco technology could be used in sports stadiums around the world and so on." And he said, "I don't know if this was real or not." So he went to the guy who created the video, and he said, "Is this for real?" And our chief demonstration officer who had created that video said, "Well, it's aspirational. We want people to get there, but it's not real." So Stuart Hamilton said, "I'm going to try to create it." So he gets all excited about it. And he said he put in an unsolicited proposal for a job that didn't exist. He went out and started talking to sports teams and saying, "How could Cisco technology be used in your stadiums?" He got them to give him some baseball and football tickets. He used those tickets to traded them for lab equipment. He got a bunch of ragtag engineers, put some stuff together, and created this thing called Stadium Vision. And some of the guys at Cisco said, "Gosh, this looks pretty interesting. Let's give some more fuel to the fire. Let's really get this going." And next thing you know, this is starting to become popular. This guy is using his own Visa card to fund visits to customers. He's truly a superstar. But then we had to really work to make sure that the team was there with him, providing him all the support and infrastructure. And once the whole team got engaged, it took the spark of the guy and it took the power of the team to scale it. One of the guys who was on the team was our treasurer, a finance guy who knew nothing about technology but loved sports. So he got together with Stuart and he said, "Let's go do it." And they went in together. They actually went to Arizona in 2007 and said to the folks who were organizing the Super Bowl, "We'll put all these screens and technology for the Super Bowl." That was pretty gutsy. Believe it or not, they actually got the deal to do 30 or 40 screens. And it worked. And this was just a ragtag bunch of guys with a little bit of support from a team. And since that time, they went in to the New York Yankees. And as they talked to all the different sports owners, they had different ideas about what will work and what will not work and so on and so forth. But all of them had to do with the fan experience. And Stewart said, look, if you really want to make money, where do most of your profits come from? And they said, by selling the concessions during the midtime, during the breaks. And he said, well, if you're selling concessions and somebody's standing in line and the game starts up, what's he going to do? The person's going to run back. Well, what if there's a screen up there that's showing all the plays, including the instant replays? He's going to stand in line for the next 10 minutes because he really wants that hot dog and Coke. And by the way, that Coke costs 50 cents to make, or maybe 10 cents to make, and they sell it for $4, $5, $6. So that's where you make the money, and all of a sudden he actually implemented the system, and the next thing the New York Yankees realized that an average family that was spending $18 per game on concessions is now spending $32 per game, almost double, and most of that is profit. More profit than you can get on ticket sales. So all of a sudden, we win the New York Yankees Stadium. And then we win the Dallas Cowboys stadiums and the New Meadowlands Stadium and the Kansas City Royals and many other stadiums around the country and, in fact, around the world. One guy acting as a superstar, leveraging his efforts with the whole team, working together, making good things happen. My point is simply this, that when you have individual stars who are right up there at the top providing some color, they can actually have the people in gray who might be the regular team members actually generate better outcomes because their color can bleed over and you can really have stars aligning with teams. But I want to come back to the story of the US basketball team because I love it so much. 6 years ago, they came back and they were in shambles. And yet, 2 years ago, when they went back to Beijing, they hired Coach K from Duke to actually come and coach the team. And he picked the players who were selfless, who wanted to work as a team, and he made them practice as a team. Jason Kidd, one of the best players in the NBA, 15,000 points, 8,000 assists, actually 10,000 assists, right? One of the most legendary players. He said, Jason, I want you to play this particular position. I want you to feed the ball. I don't want you to score. In the entire tournament, he only scored 7 baskets, but yet he made a lot of help, gave a lot of help to the other players. And eventually, working together as a team, when they got it all working, in addition, they didn't lose their superstar status, and they didn't give up the capabilities that had made them superstars. They actually just layered on top of it the capabilities as a team. And when they did, magic happened, and they won the gold medal. And there you see, the third person from the right is Coach K, who brought them together. And ironically, the third person on the left is the same 20-year-old who's now 24 years old, Carmelo Anthony, who did actually get to redeem himself and bring home the gold. So in concluding, let me make just a couple of points here quickly. Doing both is a very simple concept. It says, if you go down this path, there's an opportunity cost of the other path not taken. I've been in hundreds of meetings with John Chambers, our CEO, and somebody will come and say, John, I got a great business for you. It's going to grow dramatically, but it's not very profitable. Or somebody else will say, we got a great business, it's very profitable, but it's not very rapid growth. And in every instance, he says, go back. I can find a lot of people who can give me one or the other. I want somebody who can give me both, and I want somebody who can give me both in such a manner that each builds on itself and creates a bigger and bigger virtuous cycle. That's what I'm looking for. That's the doing both concept, a multiplier effect. And if you have that mindset, that mind snap to really make sure that you're looking for doing both in virtually everything that you're doing, you can actually make it work in virtually every aspect. I go back to the Golden Gate Bridge. The picture in black and white represents the strength of the Golden Gate Bridge. And the color picture represents the beauty of the Golden Gate Bridge. And to me, it still exemplifies not just a logo for our company, but something that truly captures that essence of doing both. And I can guarantee that from now on, if you ever visit San Francisco, or if you ever see a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, you'll forever be touched, because you'll always remember the one principle of doing both. Thank you for your time. And by the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, there's the Twitter handle right there, and my doing both thing as well.
Thanks very much, Inder. We will have a 20-minute break, and then we will reconvene over in the Business and Aerospace building for the various tracks. And if you'd like to come and by and ask Inder some additional questions and talk a little bit more about his book, he will be in the Leadership and